9 feet, 9 or 10 feet across, something like that. One of the witnesses recalls seeing strange symbols on the side, similar to Egyptian hieroglyphs. He and his colleague, some pictures were taken, but they were subsequently told they didn't come out properly because the object was too bright. Then the UFO, whatever it is, took off and accelerated away at high speed. The following night, or in fact 2 nights later, the deputy base commander, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Holt, was at a social function when suddenly the door burst open and a young Air Force officer came up, saluted, and said, "Sir, it's back." Colonel Holt looked confused and he said, "What are you talking about? What is back?" And the junior officer said, "The UFO, sir. It has returned." So Colonel Holt threw together a small team of people and he went out into the forest to investigate this. In his own words, he said, "I went out to debunk this UFO nonsense because it was becoming a distraction." He said, "I thought this was all nonsense." He was not able to debunk this because he himself then saw the UFO. And there is a tape recording where he is recording his thoughts as he goes along and his observations, and you can hear the stress and indeed panic in his voice. One of the other things that he did, which was very important, and again, this is part of the material that is in the Ministry of Defense X-Files, is he went back to the spot where the UFO apparently landed on the first night, and he took one of the experts in disaster preparation, and he had a Geiger counter with him. And they took some radiation readings from the spot where the UFO landed, and the Ministry of Defense, our defense intelligence staff, so our scientific and technical specialists, said that the levels of radiation that Colonel Holt and his team recorded were significantly higher than the average background levels for that area. And of course, the key point here is that the radiation levels reached their peak on the trees where it seemed that branches had been smashed off where this thing came down, and particularly in 3 indentations in the ground where the witnesses said this thing had landed and was on legs, a sort of tripod device. Those 3 holes formed a perfect triangle, and in each of those holes, that's where the radiation levels were at their highest. There was another case, again, recently released in all this material that has been made public, from 1993. So this was an investigation that I led, and this involved a wave of sightings, probably well over 100 people in different parts of the United Kingdom. Many of them were police officers, and because 2 military bases were involved, this time British bases, not American bases. Just for once, we managed to keep the Americans out of a UFO case. The two bases are called Cosford and Shawbury. A patrol of Air Force police officers at Cosford saw the UFO fly quite high over the base. But at the second base, called Shawbury, the meteorological officer, at about 2:30 in the morning, he was one of the few people on duty at the time, and he received a call. He heard about the sighting earlier at Cosford, and he just laughed. But then he saw the UFO himself traveling towards the base, and he said this was a large triangular-shaped craft, perhaps halfway in size between a C-130 Hercules transport aircraft and a Boeing 747. He said this object moved very slowly to start with, but then he said suddenly, again, this accelerated away to the horizon, several times faster than a military jet. This is a man with 8 years' experience in the Air Force, speaking to me the morning after this account, and he was pretty shocked by what he had seen. One other interesting point is he said that there was a strange sound coming from the craft. He said it was a low-frequency humming sound that he could feel in his body, rather like standing too close to a bass speaker, that sort of effect. And one other thing, he said that as this triangular object approached the base, it seemed to be firing a narrow beam of light, like a searchlight, into the fields near to the military base. And he said this beam was sweeping backwards and forwards, as if it was looking for something. And then he said that the beam just shut off. And this, by the way, was a thin beam, like a laser beam, not a wide beam, like a searchlight. But he said that shortly after the beam shut off, disappeared, that was when the UFO suddenly accelerated away. And interestingly, in all of this, when he saw the acceleration, there was no sonic boom, which again was another factor that puzzled some of our defense analysts who looked at this. My head of division was very skeptical about UFOs. He didn't even like the fact that the UFO project was part of his division. He thought it was a waste of time and resources. But on this occasion, he became very excited. And I'm not saying that he believed this was extraterrestrial. I think perhaps he thought that this was some secret aircraft or drone, even though these things really aren't tested in that way. Secret aircraft and drones are almost always test flown in very clearly defined, restricted areas of airspace. But he didn't know what else to think. So even he, as a big skeptic, wrote a document